Now this is where we ended at the end of tape 8. We had block sanded everything out nice and smooth. Next step we're going to try to, well, actually try to get done here. We want to get the horn on the back of the trailing edge, get our controls all neutralized, and we're using an 1/8 inch rod with a splice in it rather than using up in a little arrow shaft on this wing. That's a new thing for us. We want to get the tip blocks cut out, and again we're going to have to fish through some pretty ratty blocks to try to make do, but as long as we get the light ones on the inboard wing and the heavy ones on the outboard wing, I think it'll be fine. And then we're going to have to wait until Midgley sends me the wood for the flaps. He's promised me, but of course his promises are like, well, Dave, they didn't get here yet. Nah. One thing, when I get rich, I'm going to be able to afford more than a banana for lunch. Anyway, let's go to work. Now what I had done is I had put this little piece of tubing over here so the push rod wouldn't fall back into the wing, which was an ongoing pain in the neck before. That just held on there. Now what I wanted to do, this is the first time I'm using an 1/8 inch rod. What I want to do is I'm going to bend up. First I'm going to install a horn. I'll notch this out and get the horn right on center line. And then I'm going to make up a little piece of 3/32 wire just for the connector. Then I can fine tune it. I'll wrap this with copper wire and just fine tune the distance so I can have the same amount up travel and down travel. And most important of all, when a bell crank is in neutral, that the elevators are in neutral. And hopefully we'll be able to get that done today without a problem. Now I'm just putting a piece of tape on here to hold this in place. In fact, what I want to do is move this up just a little bit, because every time it falls into the wing, you got to do this jiggling act to get it out. Okay, now step one is have the horn. I silver soldered up the bushings, made the little retainers. I want to make sure I have this laid out here properly. Get my little pen. And I know my clips are going to end here. A little gouge for the clips, and the horn itself is going to end here. And down here I'm going to notch this out. I just want to get a nice notch in here for clearance for the horn. Now I've marked up exactly where that horn is going to end, and I want to put a little half moon in. The first thing I want to do is get a little half moon notch for the length of the whole wire, and then indent it in so that the little clips can hold it into the trailing edge. Now the easiest way I know to do this, just use the horn itself and just press it into the soft wood. It'll make a nice little notch, groove, whatever. You need to go in roughly just a little bit less than half the thickness of the horn. So it is an 1/8 inch wire. You need to go in just a little less than a 1/16, and that's just for clearance. So that's just pressed right in at the soft end of the horn. Take the burr off the wire, press it right in. Now, in between these two lines, we're going to take a nice number 11 blade, cut a slot, and then press the horn in and make sure we have the center of the horn right where we want it. Now, what I do just to give myself a little extra clearance for adjustment, I run a machinist ruler right down that slot. Now that gives me a little clear. I don't want to get the horn in this way or this way or this way or this way. There's 4 dimensions this horn has to be right in. You just have to keep picking away at it until you get that right on center. And what needs to happen is I need to get just a little more clearance here. I want the horn closer up into the wing. So I'm going to notch this just ever so slightly, maybe 10-15 thousandths, just to get this closer. And one of the problems you can have with controls and not realize it is you get the horn center line and the hinge center lines in a different center line. Pretend you had a laser light beam and you could shoot it right down the middle of the horn and the middle of all the hinge centers. Then you would have perfectly smooth controls. They wouldn't stick under load. What happens if you have the center line of the horn off a little bit, when you pull them in full deflection, everything's off a little bit and they get sticky or there's extra friction or whatever. Nothing good is happening. Again, this is just one of these deals. You just got to pick away at it and keep dry fitting it. Another thing too, you want the bushings pressed right up tight against the upright so that the upright can't go sliding back and forth while you're doing all your fine adjustments. Oh, that looks perfect. Oh my God. Borelli is gonna shit. He loves it. And it looks real good. Now we're going to take, I'll do it off camera, put a drop of oil in here and a drop of oil in here before we glue it, just so that the CA doesn't get in there and glue our horn right in position. Just doesn't take a lot of chain lube. I'll let this soak in here and work it into the bushing. Pull the bushing out the other side. Put a little drop on the center. This will just keep the CA from making a mess. If you get a drop of CA down in there, you glue the horn to the trailing edge, oh my God, pain in your neck. Work that in, then we'll take the rest of it off with M600, clean everything up with M600. Make sure it's nice and free, yeah, okay. Now a little bit of M600 will get all the extra off so you don't wind up making a mess on the wing. Also gets all the grease off your hands at the same time. And I glued this in with thick CA. I'm just trying to make sure I have a nice completely free movement here. And if I don't, of course, now is the time to rip it out. Now what I'll do is I'll run a little piece of carbon fiber right around the trailing edge here to hold this in position. Just use some thin CA, tack one side and wrap it right around. And I like to use a Q-tip to just kick this off rather than kick her if possible. Nothing quite as much fun as having this stuff stick to your fingers while you're trying to work with it. As always, we try to get the dust and the Q-tips to kind of kick it off in a nice slow fashion rather than have all that bubbling and everything. I'll just build up a second coat on here and let this kick off by itself. And I can dress this off with some sandpaper. Now what I did, I put a couple more layers of CA on here and then block sanded it all out. Took a piece of sandpaper and put it underneath the horn to get this radius to follow right up to the metal. And now what I'm going to do is get this push rod, I'm going to pull this tape off and make up this little piece of 3/32 wire, bind it together and solder it, and get all my neutrals. Now I just opened up the push rod hole here enough, and I'm going to take this last little bit of wire, maybe an inch long, and serrate it so that I can get a good grip on the wire. I need this amount of hole opening now, and I don't want to make it any bigger than I have to, but I certainly don't want to have any, how can I say it, any bind there. Okay, now what this will do is we're going to serrate the other piece of wire, of course, and then we'll get a nice bite and a good place for our copper wire to get a bite in, so it's almost like threads on a wire. Okay, now I just put this wire on real loose now. Pull it with a little piece of wire. This gives me an adjustment. I can make, because I have all these little teeth, I can jump one tooth at a time and get a real fine adjustment. And what I'm trying to figure is that when the bell crank is in neutral, I'm looking in that little slot, I can see the bell crank is in dead neutral. I want the flaps in neutral. When I have full down, full up, I want it to be equal. Once it's equal, I can solder that joint. And of course I can just fine tune it now, just let it jump one notch at a time as I have to do it. Now one of the nice features of doing it this way is you can, even after you solder the joint, you can go back in and heat the joint and fine tune this if you have to. Obviously we would like to get it right. Now, a couple of things I've noticed. This is always best with the small wire on top. It makes the geometry go into the bell crank a little bit better. And when we're all done, we'll make a nice even cut around here for clearance. I also put some ridges down here so I can get my eyelet on here. I can solder this all in one throw if I can, one warming of the soldering gun. And I'm just looking around here. I can kind of pinch this a little bit. And of course, stay bright solder only. No rosin, acid core, nonsense solder. Stay bright silver solder for this. Oh, another thing too, in case I didn't mention, push rods always go out, not in. This way, even if the washer was to come off, centrifugal force should hold that in. Let's hope anyway. But always have the push rods facing out. What I'm going to do, I got a little brass eyelet, relatively nice tight fit. Now what I'm going to do is wrap this with some copper wire too. This is a redundant system. Just in case this solder joint ever let go, the wire in the notches would hold that on. We're going right in through the notches. And this is just a redundant system so that even as years go by, maybe that soldering joint would deteriorate, although I've never seen a bad soldering joint would stay bright. This is the only soldering flux to ever use. Stay bright. Melts at 410, doesn't melt things, belt cranks and lead out guides and stuff. One of the other good things when you're done, baking soda and water deflux it. Baking soda and water, be sure to deflux it. Now this joint especially, you want to make sure you have a really, it's going to take time to heat this joint up. You want to really have a good solid joint here. You definitely want to spend some time defluxing it. Baking soda and water for the defluxing agent. Now one thing, never do, never connect two push rods with a piece of either copper tubing or those sleeves that SIG sells. They have failed in service even more than ball links have. I mean, you're running a real high-risk thing by using those sleeves. This is, if you're going to make a splice in a wire for any reason, this is really the best way to do it. It isn't pretty, yeah, I understand. I know it's not pretty, and I know you want a nice big pretty joint, but this one doesn't fail in service. And the other ones, like Jimmy Casale lost many planes. I know Ed Captanelli's son lost 2 of them. I know other people have lost planes, and we're trying to learn from those mistakes so we don't have to do this over and over again. Let that joint get good and hot. Heat is what makes it work. And you want it to be shiny when you're done with the joint. Shiny is the word. And if it's not perfect and you don't have the same amount up and down, well, just warm it up and either push it in or pull it out just a little bit. You'll have a little like a ratchet with those threads in there. Now always let the joint cool naturally. You'll notice when you put the flux neutralizer on there, baking soda and water, the joint will turn like a sandy gray. But you also notice all the black will come off, and that's all the old sulfuric acid from the flux. I'll spend a minute or two and clean this joint up. Look at what comes off. Now I just want to make sure I have this joint perfectly clean of all that flux off. And obviously then I'll check to make sure everything is 0-0 again. Same amount up, same amount down. Flap horn and bell crank in neutral at the same time. Now I just want to trim off the excess wire beyond. Radius this off so I'm not chewing my hand up. I just want to dress off all these edges, clean it up. Now the last thing we're going to do today, the guys are coming over, big Monday night at Wendy's for pizza, so with everybody on their way over here, what I want to do, I'm just going to trace this out into a nice neat push rod hole. See, it's rubbing up here, binding up here just a little bit. We'll neaten that up, and that'll be it for today. Now to get a nice shape up here, the Dremel sanding drum is just about the right size. I want to radius this edge off so we get a nice clean joint on a silk span here. Just a little workmanship here, a little craftsmanship that you'll never see unless the plane goes in. And STREGA, you better not go in. Alright, I'm going to get ready for Monday night at Pizzaville here. That's about it for today. All right, I'd rate that as a pretty good day. Again, every step of the way you want to check that you have up and down, equal up and down. Bell cranks in neutral, I say that a million times, but that really is a super important thing.
Angle, there's no, like, this is just like wall to wall. There's just like an explosion in an airport.
Check this out, Mike Costello's here. It's Monday night. Look, this guy has about 200 model planes in his cellar. This is Frank Perez. He's showing off his modeling collection. How many did he buy at the swap meet?
I don't know, 8 or 10.
He bought 10 models. That isn't how many he has. He must have 50 models here.
The black one, I remember the black one.
Oh my God, look at this. It's amazing. Peabody would do a Sabre stunt there. Look at a Sabre stunt.
Sabre stunt.
This is the one I got from Hampshire.
Holy mackerel. This is amazing footage.
Hampshire sold him a cheese
You got a
that's
bar
disguised as
down there.
a
Looks like
carrier
it's
ship of some sort.
I can't believe this, man. Unreal. The guy has 100 model planes in his say. He's got boats. That Vic Macaluso sitting down there. Oh my God! Look at this. Is that the GB?
He's gonna play the bongos out of the way.
Is that you?
This GB is like a drum.
I've got the wing here for it, too.
Which wing are you gonna put on?
This one. This one.
Take a wing.
Take a wing.
Scale.
Holy mackerel! Unreal.
Cool.
This little wing. Okay?
How you gonna, oh, I see, you gotta take off those, you gotta take off.
Just another day at the stunt factory here.
You find a way to attach it here?
Oh, yeah. Just glue it right in. It'll be 2 of them. That's it.
Just amazing. The Giants are already getting beat.
I still think you should get.
What's the score in the game, Mike?
I don't know.
I'm a band that needs bongo players.
Houston's beating the Giants. Unreal.
Like,
It looks
got
like a
the
conga
Ricky
drum.
Ricardo act.
A conga drum, yeah.
And, he says, Dave, can you...
Now what's the deal? He only buys planes that are $10 or less.
He doesn't add a build.
$10 or less, and he'll buy it. Anything.
Well, he doesn't build a lot. He doesn't have time. He's going for his doctorate degree.
I have a few left.
You know what it sounds like? You ever see the commercial? Any car you can pull onto the lot will give you $2,000 for.
He's stockpiling planes, going to learn to fly with these junker airplanes, and he doesn't have
I
time.
know a guy that does that with girlfriends.
He's going for his doctorate degree,
That's our
and
visit
he'll not have much time for building.
to Perez shop.
What a day. The Perez shop.
This one up here.
Truly a work of art.
Yeah, it's a nice
The orange
position.
magician?
Is there anything he doesn't have?
Patch them up. I'm not even going to clean them up. I'm just going to patch them up, get them up in the air, go through the pattern, run the pattern, then I can start doing some decent ships. Because I've got a bunch of kits on here.
Look at the kits.
Lucy down there. I've got
How many kits has he got? 100 kits?
Here's the kits.
Look at the kits. Holy mackerel.
My flying abilities are not up to par. So, let me pick up a few crashables here and there.
tutor down
Crashables, I like that name. Crashables.
I left. Peabody was talking to a young fellow somewhere around 1 o'clock or so. So when I walked out with
Just
the,
amazing.
magician,
Unbelievable.
and I don't know what.
Now I decided to take a little break here around Thanksgiving time. I gutted out this part of the cellar. I know this is of minimum interest, but I'm going to try to get rid of this paint cabinet. And we want to build a new bench here. We kind of have a crowded area here to work on our grindstones and everything. Everything's all crowded up. So, and the other thing I want to do, now you can see because I'm working on, we have actually 5 different airplanes in here at the same time. PMs, Kestrels, more PMs, PMs over here, PMs in the back, built up wings, my wings, Jeff's wings, Jimmy's wings. So what's happened is not enough room. So what I did, this is George's invention. I took this dresser, and maybe this is something you could use for a good tip. Took this dresser and put 2 spacers on it. These are 1x4s, and 2 hollow doors. So now what I have, I can store a wing in there, a wing and a body, a wing and a whole PM fits in there. And I have the whole top surface, of course. So I actually can store 3 full pattern masters on top of that dresser. And of course the other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get the Sidewinder out of here and put up another fluorescent light. So this can even be another workstation for our Monday night stuff. And we have a pizza table down here, and oh man, we're just cranking along here. Anyway, I have another fluorescent light to go up. That's an idea right there. I think a lot of people can use, and of course I'm going to give it a nice white paint job. Anything you can make white makes brighter, more light reflecting and everything.
And then you're having to hand in hand is what kids say.
Now the point here is, if you watch the videos from when I actually bought this house and started on the shop, you'll know how I feel about things that in a shop, everything that can possibly be should be painted white, Rust-Oleum, high gloss, Now this is just a primer coat that I'm given. This is going to have a coat of Rust-Oleum gloss paint. It reflects the light well. It airs out the shop. It makes it look bigger than it really is, cleaner, neater, whatever. And I don't think there's anything, you know, that contributes more to enjoying the time you build than having friends over, and like we have these Monday night sessions with the pizza. But having a nice shop, boy, it sure goes a long way toward, man, it's like having a good wife. Just goes a long way toward making your life a pleasant experience. And now that we have this set up, this will allow us to, we have 2 more orders for Cardinals to build for customers. So what we're in the middle of doing is trying to gear up for our production capability here. Obviously not everybody builds this much, but anything that works for me well, I like to try to pass on, and having a nice shop works well. Now while the first coat of paint is drying, I'm going to pull down the Sidewinder. I want to get another fluorescent light up there. It'll lighten up this area, and we will have added by about 50% to our workstation capability here. Now the final product here. Hey, it's really worked out nice. Got the little power supply here with the little switch. A couple new pictures. Dress it up a little bit. I'm sure this will add a little bit to our the little environment here. The Pro Stunt environment. Anyway, hope you didn't mind sharing this little episode with me. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. Hey, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Monday night here at Wendy's. Half of the crowd is here, but the important part of the crowd isn't here yet. Mike Costello's out picking up the pizza, and Rich Pipebody is on his way over here. He, I don't know what he went to pick up, women in bars or something. Anyway, yeah, that's coming out nice. Coming out nice. I like these lead-outs. That is slick looking. Neat. Anyway, this is what he's going to take to Tucson, and from week to week we'll put a minute or 2 on each Monday night. We have our building class. Hey, we're also planning on doing a session up at Scott Smith's, a spray, and Ryan's sanding away here. Sand, slave, sand. What's Dad doing here? Uh-oh. Dad's glassing a wing with the Windy method here. Anyway, we're just waiting for pizza. Pizza is on its way.
Almost more important than flying, huh?
It is. Now, you know, the last couple of days, the last week has just been crazy around here. Working on a shop, changing things. We have the back room finished, so we're trying to catch up on our mail here. And today I got some pictures. I want to share these with you. They're from Uwe Degner from Germany. And this is a really pretty plane and a nice set of photos. Obviously, I'll send these on to Stunt News. Now, check this out. This is something of interest. This is a little support he made for the plane. I guess our tune pipe friends will be needing this more than the 60 people. You can lay the plane there and change the tune pipe and replace the rubber coupler and replace the whole plane here upside down. Here he shows how he's using it. Nice name too, One More Magnum. How this works, he sent me a little diagram, and of course anybody wants to drop Uwe a letter and get some diagrams or however he made this. It looks like a very interesting cradle, and it holds the plane in 2 separate ways here. When you turn it over the other way, it holds the plane that way, I guess. Anyway, now looking at Uwe's shop here, just another thing, it looks like he's been a Pro Stunt customer for a while, by the way. Check this, he's got a lot of videos. Check the rack he has. He's kind of done a Pro Stunt rack. He has a Cardinal kit. He's building a Magnum. This I guess is the Magnum that we see in the picture under construction. In the letter that he wrote, he said he's just taken so much advantage of the Pro Stunt videos that you know, he's real thankful that I'm doing them. And I'm thankful that people like him are passing the information along. Another nice picture, and this is one more picture he sent. Uwe Degner, I hope I'm saying it right, Degner. This is Uwe's address if anybody would like to drop him a line for some diagrams. Well, just make a pen pal. And obviously that's how I get to be friends with these people from all over the world. Spend a nickel on a stamp, Midgley. Alright, I only have about 2 hours today, but one of the first things I want to show is I want to take out of my little storage bench here where it's out of harm's way. And you can imagine with all the pizza parties going on here, I don't want my stuff busted up. I want to take that, lay it out on a table here, and what I want to do is I want to make up some tip blocks, and that's probably all I'll get done today, is get the tip blocks roughed out. I have this piece of wood, which is a 6.5 pound density wood. Midgley hasn't sent me a good block yet. Anyway, listen, what I have to do here, I have to get out the tail, get out the wing, and kind of marry them up so I can get the same shape on the tail as on the wing. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to show this is I prefer, and it's my personal choice, that the wing tips and the tips of the stab and elevators kind of match. Kinda. You know, kinda is a good word here. Kinda match. Kinda match. Now, not everyone does. The Red Baron, kinda match. Kinda match. Well, kinda match is the deal here. I'd like to get these to kinda match if I possibly can. So now what I'll do is I'll line up this stab. I'll get this all assembled here so I have roughly the angle of the tip, and then I'll lay out my block here and try to get a tip that kind of coordinates with that. See, now one of the ways you can really do this is you can take all these dimensions and reduce them by half, and you'll come up with the same rough pattern. But I would rather do it by eye. I'd rather do kind of an interpolation here. You never want to make this corner of the tip block, this corner down here, you don't want to make it come down to almost nothing. I like to leave at least a 1/2 inch there. So I'm going to allow myself a 1/2 inch for that piece. And I want to have the front part at least 1.5 inches. And then of course it's just a question of connecting the dots here and getting an idea of how this looks. Trying to hold that angle in my mind. Looks like we need a little more of an angle, in fact. Well, we'll rough one of these out. Again, this is kind of a trial and error thing. We'll rough it out and get a look at how we're going to like this. Now again, we're not looking to make big, giant cardinal kind of wingtips. We'd like to keep this, you know, pretty conservative here. But we want that angle and this angle to be kind of close. So what I'm going to do now, I'll go to my newly renovated tool room here and clip this out. And then just by one block, looking at one block that's cut, I can kind of see if I like the look or if I'm going to ultimately change it. Now see, I just let this come to a point, and then what I do is sand the ultimate radius in. I don't like to cut that radius in. Sand it in the final, I don't know, you know, lay the tail on a table and kind of look at it, and then do the wing and kind of look at it and try to make them match back and forth. You know, hopefully that's the way this is going to work out. Now, if you just take 1 second out and look, this is the old tool room, which is now the new tool room. You can get a little idea. We had a leftover countertop. This may be an idea that you can use on your, you know, on your own shop or whatever. Got all the tools back to where they're hanging up. Let's hope, you know, in some orderly fashion here. But what I did, because this countertop is shiny Formica, I put the sander and the saws on there, so that I can kind of scoop up the sawdust real easily. I have a little area for my paint, the 2 grindstones, the drill press, and this ultimately is going to get moved. It's only there temporarily. So, with that in mind, hey, you know, I did the old thing, painted everything white, try to, you know, open it up a little. Took the shop vac. I'm going to make a little table here later for shelving and stuff for the shop vac. And Jimmy is supposed to get, we hope he'll get anyway, a little dust collection system for us soon. Another neat little trick. You can see this. I have a little ceiling mounted light for right over the drill press for doing small work. That worked out real nice. All stuff we made. The tabletop actually got made out of a piece of scrap wood. And this was a piece of scrap I had left over from the renovation of my 2-family house. So we're going to cut that block out, back to building. We only have about 2 hours here. Let's get the blocks hogged out. Now this will be the first piece of wood cut in our newly renovated tool room here. All new switches. Now we can kind of lay this out, get a look at roughly if we're going to be happy with that. Once we're happy with that, bring out this, boy this is not the greatest piece of wood. Bring out the piece of wood, and we'll make 3 more blocks. And of course the deal is now you want to keep the flat side, the pre-cut side of the wood as the part that's going to go up against the wing rib. And we'll try to lay these out so we can get them all out of this block. Midgley demanded that on video. I apologize. He did send me some flap wood. It arrived in the mail yesterday, and it is nice wood. I have to give him credit. I take back all the bad things I said about you, Dave. Again, I haven't put that radius in there yet. We'll let that go for now. And this is just a roughing out of the blocks for now. Always when you rough them out, another tip, always make them a little bit oversized. Don't make them right exactly to the size you want. Allow a little bit of material here, so just in case the saw blade wanders off aimlessly. Now I want to transpose out my center line. You notice we cut these blocks in 2 clamshell halves, and they're going to run right along the center line. Both sides now run right along the center line. Be nice if I put them the right way. And if you work off that center line, you'll find it making a tip weight box, the guide, the wire guide, will be very easy. But the first thing you need to do is get that center line on there. Now one of the things you can do if you really want to be a fanatic, you can take the 4 blocks, go weight them up, take the 2 lightest ones for the inboard tip. These all feel real close. They're lousy too. Anyway, one of the first steps I want to do is get out the big sanding block. All the edges that are going to join together. Where I'm going to join these together, I want them to be perfectly flat so I get a nice flat glue seam. And all the sides that are going to join against the rib, I'd like to have them nice and flat too. So I'll spend 4 or 5 minutes here with each block, truing them up at least, so I can get a nice smooth joint. Hopefully one that after we do all the finishing and the silver and whatnot and whatever, put it up for concourse judging and Midgley won't say, "Oh, look, I can see the seam." Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through the procedure that I use for making up a tip weight box and a lead out guide. It's the way I've done it almost every time. It comes out absolutely bulletproof and straight, and if you follow this step by step, most of the problems that people have trying to make the tip weight box or the lead out guide, the reason it takes them longer than it really should is because they don't do the steps in sequence. So if you just try to, bear with me on this. We've spent a whole week working on this shop here, and I'm back in the saddle here with this building project. And I want to try to lay it out thoughtfully and carefully, one step at a time, so that you'll be able to build real nice, clean, either big cardinal swoopy wingtips or these little fat guys. Either way, you'll be able to do it in a minimum amount of time. Have it come out as good as Midgley's, and then go beat him at a contest. Anyway, hey, I have to say, we didn't get any video today. Jimmy Borelli was here, but we had the visit you couldn't believe. We really had a good time. Did some patch-up work on Misty. Got Misty back in the action. Debbie Borelli and my wife went out and spent so much money. Fortunoff called to congratulate me on marrying the right woman. And the next one of our big holidays here is going to be Christmas, and already I've started the nonsense putting up the tree in the village that we always put up every year. And in case you get these tapes later than the subscribers do, the subscribers will get them right away. Let me wish everybody happy holidays, best wishes, and all that good stuff. Now, we have the two blocks. We want to join them on center. Get them as neat and true as possible. Just tack glue them together, and I'll do that off camera. And then get this surface perfectly flat, so that when we take that surface and press it up on a wing, we don't have a ripply surface. So job one here is going to be, I'm just going to take the slightest amount of glue here, and we're going to I want to make sure they're lined up. Now, the object of using the minimum amount of glue here, if you glue the whole seam, you're going to have to cut it. And we're looking not to cut this glue seam. Burying these glue seams is hard enough when they're accurate. 4 or 5 little drops of CA should hold that down. Let that kick. And then we're going to do the final positioning of this on the wingtip, referencing off the center line. So now the center line of the two blocks marries up with the center line of the outboard tip. All right, now before we can trace out the F-wheel shape, we have to get these blocks pinned in place. Okay, now these are pinned on the center line of the rib, center line of the block, the split. I want to get a nice clean line here. And then what I'm going to do is go to the jigsaw. Because I have a flat surface here, I should be able to pick up this line real nice. Now with the line on there, what I'm going to do when I put this, and this is important, when I put this on the jigsaw table, I'm going to put a piece of scrap on there so I get the saw blade to cut down 90 degrees. If I just was to cut on this side, I would pick up that angle, and I'd really like not to pick up that angle. So I'm just going to shim the back up with a little piece of scrap wood. I just noticed I left the line on here. I'm leaving myself a little bit of extra meat. Leave the line on when you do the cutting of a block. Now obviously I'll just repeat the same thing off camera for the other tip, and we'll get them both glued on. Now one little tip I wanted to put on here, when you're doing the inboard tip, obviously we'll work on the inboard tip, you can just take the lead-out wires, bend them back, and shove them in a wing. You can see where I have these just sitting here. So you don't have to work around having them. The reason I say this is, I had somebody from the club bring me a wing one time, and they were carving the outboard wing with the wires there. And oh, I chewed up the wires and the yuck. And when I explained to them that this would be a better way to do it, you know, it was like the Miracle on 42nd Street or the Hookers on 42nd Street or something. Anyway, that is a good way to do it. We'll cut this one off camera and we'll be ready to tack glue them in place. Now when you glue the blocks on, obviously one of the things you want to be real careful of is getting the center lines lined up. And number two is making sure that you don't have the block below the cap strips. It's real easy to misalign the block and have, you know, a spot that's low around the cap strip. So what's easy to do here is just put a dot on. That's nice, right on the floor. Just get it tacked in place. Before you go any further, make sure you have the alignment that you're looking for. And right around the cap strips you have plenty of meat. You can go right back down now and just tack it right in. And once you're really happy that you have the alignment that you want, make sure that's all around. Now we can go by and just get a little extra CA along the edges, especially the leading and trailing. It's most important to get it CA'd in by the leading and trailing edge. That's what's going to be doing all the holding while you're doing the carving. Now let this kick off and we're ready to start shaping the wingtips. Now I want to get a little piece of masking tape right around the edge. What this will do, it'll keep me from running a sanding block down into the cap strips, just like you do on a foam wing. And it'll give you a little extra meat in the tip. Then when you put it on for the final joint, you'll have that a little bit extra to sand in there. Now what I like to do is lay it on the floor, stand up, and then see if I have that look that I want. Now obviously I'm going to have that radius front, the radius that after I do the carving. But right now, having that rough look that I'm really happy with, I think this is going to be just about what I want, so I can start laying out the carving. The best advice I can give you for carving up a wingtip, brand new number 26 blade, nice small slices, rough out the shape, do the final shaping with a sanding block instead of a knife, but you can get 90% of it off just by carving with the good old number 26 blade. And we'll switch to the animation feature here in a minute or so, just so we don't spend the whole, the whole tape watching me carve O-matic here. Small, just get the technique, small little shavings, much better than trying to gulp it all up at once. Now, as always, the last little bit you have to really just take off in very thin shavings. I'm closing in on having half of this done right now. I like to do it by feel and then just by looking up, seeing how much I want to take off. And of course, one of the goals I have, I try not to sand anything that I can carve. If I can carve it all, 90% of it, just less dust I have to breathe in down in my shop here. Now you can see how many shavings we've taken off. We have left just a little material, so it's a little bigger than the wing insiders. I can get the final little contour with a sanding block. And of course now the only thing that's left, flip it over, do the other side of the same block. Now obviously when we start this side, we're working toward where these two blocks join. So we'll kind of use that as our center line. Now another thing, another trick, if you will, the grain, you can see the grain real clear in this piece. The grain is going this way. If you get carving this way, a lot of times the knife will just catch and go right in. So most of this way, you noticed I reversed the angle that I'm carving. I want to carve from front to back on this side because I can see the way this grain is going in this block of wood. This is not, again, this is not Midgley's best block of wood. If I had some real friends out there for Christmas, they'd send me some nice 1.5" top blocks. Anyway, we'll do the rest of this off camera with the animation feature. And just the same thing. Now I'm constantly looking to make sure I'm keeping the contour that I want. I'm not carving too much. Thin slices, a brand new knife blade. It doesn't even hurt if you do, you know, one wingtip. Go get another new knife blade. You notice it doesn't take long. These blades lose their edge. And then you just don't get the nice carving that you do with a brand new blade. I guess that's one of the things I say over and over again is new blades, new blades. Alright, another tip that'll be real handy. When you get up to the front here, the grain is coming right at you. So one of the things, if you try to carve this way, you're just going to be chopping into the grain. If you go this way, you really can't have the contour. What I'm trying to do is start at the high point of the wing and work my way down. And if the blade is at a 45-degree angle here, or a 30-degree angle, whatever, it'll glide through the wood. You notice the blade doesn't hang up when you cut in this dimension. If you try to get the blade to go right up against it, it's a real pain in the neck. It's constantly catching. It's like tripping on your shoelaces all day. And this is the most difficult part, to get this blend right into the sheeting. Now I'm looking for any high spots, and I see I have one here. Again, you can almost get everything without sandpaper. Almost everything. Don't forget, we're leaving the thickness of the tape on here too, just as a safety factor. And the best way I know of is just run your hand on there and you can feel the lumps or spots that need to be, in fact here's one right here, need to be evened off. And if you look dead on from the front or from the back, you can usually find some spots. Looking right from the front, let's see if we can do this on camera. Look right from the front and see if they have the same taper. Right from the back, the same taper. And again, you can get that final last little ice shaving off. See, I'm just taking very little off with each slice. The whole trick in being a good carver is don't try to take a lot off in one slice. Be patient. You'll save you double and triple the amount of time by not gouging one big gouge that you have to work around. All nice little ice, I call it ice shaving. When you get down to the last little bit, now you got to keep looking at it, feeling for that contour. You don't want to have a different airfoil on each side. And you'll always go to the high side and take some ice shavings off. In this case, this side is a little higher. And then we have that last little bit after we hollow the blocks out and or make the tip weight box, depending on how, which tip we're talking about here. We have that thickness of the tape we can sand into, and that'll save us if we get a little carried away making one of these parts a little bit too thin. All right, we've done about as much as we can here without sanding. We get up here, clean the table off, and we'll start roughing out the other tip. Maybe we even get the other tip just roughed out today, and that'll probably be about all we're going to get to do today. Oh, I love this. Oh, ice shaving. Now with both tips roughed out here, I'll have a little bit of time, maybe a little time here, who knows. I'm going to get a sanding block with some 220 on it and just rough this right in, but not go up and grind into the sandpaper. Leave that little bit of extra meat on there. Now, of course, clean the table too. It looks like I've been eating balsa chips here. I've been block sanding this down, and I've hit a hard spot in the grain here. It's kind of been a little bit of a pain in the ass, in fact. I have one tip sanded down anyway, and then the last step, of course, let's get the tape off. Now leave it stick up just a little bit. When we go to put this on permanently, we'll have that little bit, couple thousandths of extra wood here, and we could blend it in perfectly. Now the other one is still in a rough state. Take some 220 paper and a block, and I'll just work this up for 15-20 minutes. Get all the edges. When you get to work up in this area, this is the technique I use, is just go along the leading edge and out the tip, along the leading edge and out the, and you'll get the contour real quickly. That's the technique that gets you a real nice blend there. At least it works well for me anyway. It's that front edge. It always seems to be the most critical to get right. Now at the same time I'm doing this, I'm adjusting this radius on the leading edge so that I have the same radius and it blends right into the tip here. Nice airfoil blend. Not a big square corner or a shoebox or something. Get a nice clean airflow right around the tip. Now we're not going to be able to get a whole lot more done. I expect a boss home soon with strict orders to help her put up the Christmas tree, so don't know how much more we can maybe get this even sanded out tonight, and that'll be it. We'll pick this up tomorrow. Winter's coming. We're in full building season mode. We got the shop renovated a little bit. Had a nice visit with Borelli. Expect Midgley down soon. Monday night class is going well. Hey, one of the things we're trying to plan, too, in conjunction with Scott Smith, is a painting class for his group. He has quite a big group up there, I think 10 or 12. And maybe we'll be trekking up there on a Saturday to give some individual instruction on painting once the guys get ready for their spray work. Bring our compressor and spray guns and thinner and stuff, and be a good way to promote the hobby, I hope. Check in with Scott Smith for the latest on that. Yeah, as I said before the boss got home, the boss arrived home. I was talking about Scott Smith's hopefully spraying seminar, let's call it that. And if that's successful, you know, we're going to try to go up there. Obviously, we'll try to videotape it for you if you miss it. And I think it'll be a big help to a lot of people up there. There's 3 or 4 people I can think of right off the top of my head that really could benefit by a day of practice spraying and working on their techniques. Then add into that the fact you might get Busso involved, and he's the king of ink lines and letter sets, and maybe Midgley to come up, the king of stenciling. and you could have, like, you know, a really super finishing day. A lot of good technology will be floating around there. So more on that later. And it may be guys like Borelli and Ortiz and whoever would all like to come up. Who knows? We'll keep you posted either way. Anyway, we're about finished with this today. I'm going to put this away now. Boy, I'll tell you, a day of carving and sanding, you could choke to death here. It's unbelievable. But another thing we are going to be working on, maybe this week coming up, Jimmy is going to price out that sanding vacuum and air filtration system, and we may get that soon. I hope. Okay, till tomorrow. Have a good day. What always seems to work best is a double-edged razor with one side. You see I put tape on here so I don't cut my finger off. Okay. And of course, just go nice and slow on all the little dots of CA. This is why you didn't want to have 8 pounds of CA holding this thing on. Ooh, there's a lot of CA in it. Oh my God. Beautiful. Oh, this sucker is really on there. Hooray! You see how the CA got right down in there? Now from this point on, we don't need the lead outs inside either. We could pull the lead outs out. Now you can see where the CA got in there, a couple of lumps of wood are just irreverently stuck where we don't want them, so kind of clean this up. Then when I take that tip off, the first thing I'll do is block sand this surface flat. There we got, that's where that chunk, get this off. That CA is really, when it gets in somewhere you don't want it. Anyway, then we can block sand this surface smooth. Get the big block out. Go around here to clean these surfaces up so when we do join the block after it's hollowed and all the work is done, we'll get a nice, we're always looking for that nice, neat joint. Now this morning, first thing I want to do is have a couple of cups of coffee. I want to take both of the tips and put a line on them roughly an 1/8 inch out, and you know how we do this with using your finger for a dead stop. And that'll be the wall thickness, the absolute edge of the wall thickness, 1/8 inch. I think we'll do up the inner tip first. We'll make up the little slider. We'll use a custom-made wood slider on this, even though you could, if you wanted to, use a commercially available one. It's not that difficult to make your own. And then you can make an absolute custom fit into the wing. Okay, I'll do the other one off camera. Get these both set up, and then we'll split the blocks apart. Now we'll just do this one up here. Notice that I marked which was the inner and which was the outer, of course, and they're probably real close. Another thing I did, the last thing last night as I was putting this away, is get both of these radiuses exactly the same, just so we have symmetry on both wings. You could also look at them both from the front, make sure one isn't a lot thicker than the other. You'd like to have equal drag on both wings if possible. Now I'm just going to carefully split the blocks. Again, I'm trying to keep them a nice neat fit so I don't have a big ragged glue line along the end. And on the inner block, this is the inner block, let's just make sure, okay, I want to trace out, transpose that line, and again, leave roughly an 1/8 inch . Remember, we have a little bit extra of the thickness of the tape, so this is a good technique you really should practice or learn, or whatever you want to call it, is holding the pen so you're using the edge of your finger and the pen to draw a line equal to the end. Alright, we'll just get the other one done too, as long as we have the pen out here. Now just prepare the outer tip the same way. Oops, come on. Now on this one, we're not going to trace the outer line here because we're going to be building a tip weight box. So for now, this can just go sit in inventory. Now what I want to do, I want to take this and I want to make this just like a top block. I want to make roughly an 1/8 inch wall thickness, make like 2 clamshells out of it. I'll take the old, start with a big gouge anyway. And again, my technique is here. There goes my pacemaker off. The important idea of the technique here, for me personally anyway, is I want to do as much carving and as little sanding as possible. Now, if this was summer and we could go outside, one of the things that balsa dust kills you. One of the things we'd be able to do is I just take the sanding drum, go outside, bring the Dremel outside with an extension cord, and Dremel this whole thing off and let the wind blow it away. But because I'm working in this controlled environment here, and because I hate getting a beating from my wife for putting dust in the house, I'm just going to carve this up, and I'll get through this. Well, it'll take a little longer to do the carving, but little by little, I'm just going to turn these blocks into clamshells. Again, when I start getting them thin, just like the top block, I'll hold them up to the light. When I see a thin spot, mark it with a red pen, hit it with a little CA, and you're done at that point in time. And I'll get most of this carving done off camera. This gets to be really redundant, half an hour or so. We'll get one wingtip. Let's do the inner one. I don't know how much time we're going to have today. Again, time has been a very variable thing here, but with the gouge, just little by little by little. Don't try to take big giant chunks. You find you get the best amount of work done when you can just take little ice shavings off. Now up in the front here, it gets, because we're going against the grain, it gets real difficult. We may have to get the sanding, the Dremel drum. Oh, this is pretty soft up here. Get the Dremel drum and pick this away. If you don't mind the sawdust, the Dremel drum is okay up here. Just try to get the whole thing like a complete clamshell, about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, you can see how we've carved right up to the red line, but not beyond it. Now the rest of this I'll take out with some 80 grit sandpaper. And then I'll do this one with the animation feature or off camera or whatever here. Half done. Alright, I'm going to get some 80 grit sandpaper, and we just got this stuff. Let me just show this on camera. Jim Damerel brought this over here. Some adhesive back, different grits. We got a couple of boxes of this stuff. We're going to try using this right now. This is adhesive back, so it'll stick to foam or a block and get right in there and smooth it right out. Now when it comes down to kitting out that last little bit of balsa wood, especially up in the front of the curve, the sanding drum, and then also this little carbide ball, which is very handy for getting in those reverse curves. Two of the tools we'll be using, at least I'll be using, I just want to get the last little bit of wood out of the front of the wingtips right now. Now, you can see a spot where I've made it way too thin. In fact, you can go right through. No big deal. What you want to do is get out one of the scraps from the carving. Take this, and I'm going to try to do this on camera. Hold it inside with your bare hand. Hold it up like this, and just hit this with CA. Now, of course, when you're really trying to make this paper thin, the odds are real good that you're going to go through once in a while, and needless to say, I go through plenty of times. But it's okay if you know how to make that little repair so it's invisible from the front. I put that little piece inside, press it down with my fingers. Now try not to distort the shape. We want to keep the shape if we can. Kind of press it up into position. Just a dot of CA, and hope and pray that you don't glue your finger to it, which is what I just did. So now I need another piece. Now it's good that this stuff is happening, because you see in the real world this is how it really works. This isn't some kind of fantasy island thing. You got to be able to make these little repairs. In fact, I'll find a bigger piece here in a scrap barrel. And you notice is the same density wood. Making a little patch, one of the things you're going to have to do from time to time. Okay, we got it. Now I also have to patch the other piece. I have another little hole in the piece. What I'm doing, and I'm trying this for the first time, hold the tube from the CA in there. This way you don't be so klutzy and glue your finger to the piece. If you really do this stuff, you know from time to time you do glue your finger to it. It's a thrill. And now while that CA is still nice and thin, before it even kicks off, I can get the angle and kind of fill it up with the little sanding dust that comes off. Of course, you hold it up to the light, and any real thin spot from the inside, if it's almost thin, you run some CA in there. No, that comes right off. Nice little tip I just invented. Now look, it glues it to my hand. Unbelievable. The real world of model aviation. How come it isn't like this in magazines? Anyway, we'll kick this off, and then we can final sand these patches in. Okay, you can see how nice these little patches worked out. Now, obviously on this side, you want to sand that perfectly smooth. This side here, and if it's a little rough, you may want to fill that in with a little dap later, but The reason we're really going crazy is one of the important things, I think is important, is to have a light inboard wingtip. Any weight you put here, you're going to have to double it on the other side with a 1/2 ounce here, a 1/2 ounce on the outside, just to balance it out for your tip weight. So if you can lighten up this tip, obviously you can carry less tip weight and still get the same aerodynamic effect. Now this is that sandpaper that Jimmy brought over. It's got a sticky back, so I want to tear a little piece off. Get rid of that, put this back in the box. By the way, this stuff really does work excellent. Available at body shop supply houses, and we hopefully are going to be going to the trade show, the body shop trade show. We may pick up even some more tips. Now this is a little foam block. It's just hard rubber. And what I like this for is doing inside curves. The glue kind of sticks it there. And you can just very gently work this out. Nice for doing wingtips, top blocks, cowlings where you have curves. It's kind of a curving kind of block here. It works real nice in these inside curves especially. Now the spots where I've got this real thin, I'm just going to put a little thin CA and let it kick off. Take a Q-tip and rub it in, that'll help kick it off. Don't want to kick it on here. You can see some of the spots, I've held it up to the light, and you can see how thin, I don't know if you can see that on camera, you can see how thin they are. I'll work it out with the block, try to get a relatively smooth surface in here. Don't have to go crazy, of course. And then the outside I can get just a little bit, smooth this out so I have less stap. Now one of the things you'll notice, when you put the wingtips on a built-up wing, the wing all of a sudden gets very, very rigid. So as soon as we get the wingtips on, you'll see there's probably be a 50% increase in the rigidity of the wing. Now after sanding this some more, you can see the area that I've gotten real thin. I marked, and I'll put an extra coat of CA on there before we join these together. I hold it up to the light. If it gets thin that I can really see through it, just take the thin CA and coat that area. That'll harden it up. And of course this will get a lot harder once we put the tissue on it. Once you dope and tissue this, it gets a lot more rigid, but I don't want it paper thin, just at least for now. Take the old Q-tips out, just paint it on. Now what this means is you probably, if you have carved as thin as possible, you're probably going to have a nice light inner tip. That's going to be a real big aerodynamic advantage. But obviously you don't want it so thin that it looks like a Dutchy pretzel or something. There's a good balance line here, and I think we're right on it right now as far as being light, strong enough to keep the wing rigid and hold the lead outs in place, and yet be as light as possible. Now once that's all nice and hard on the other side here, I can put a coat of thin CA. And while it's still cooking up, put a little dust into it. It'll kick it right off. Now don't forget, we have these tips just slightly oversized by the thickness of the tape, so it gives us just a little bit of extra meat to work with here. You can see I've hardened up this end of the wood with CA, opposite exactly where that is. This patch, you can't even feel it with your hand. That'll probably go away instantly once we put some tissue and dope on there. So, but this is the real world, you know. It would be nice if you could carve blocks and never go through, but I think it's better to know how to patch. I think in the real world, that information will do you a lot more good than feeling bad that you can't carve a block without going through. Al Rabe used to say, Al Rabe, one of my heroes, of course, used to always say, the block isn't light enough until you've gone through about 5 times. And I agree with that. Now what I like to do is just tack this together first before I do anything. Just a couple little tacks of glue. Now once you're satisfied that you have it, and that you're square and flat, just glue the whole seam, and then what we'll do is flip it over once we're happy with it. And we're going to cut the middle out for the line guide and just run some glue down the inside. You can dress off that joint a little bit. Okay, next thing I want to do is cut the slot for where we're going to put the lead outs. Now, a nice neat way to do this is get a piece of 1/4 inch tape right on top of the glue seam, so the glue seam goes right through the middle of it. Now what we do is go over to last year's plane, a couple of the other planes, and see just how far forward and how far back we've had to move these lead outs from time to time. And the way I can do that, I can see how far the paint is worn out. And then I can take a reference line off of the trailing edge for how far these need to go. Now we're going to seal this with 64th plywood. This line is only for my reference. Now over to our rack for a little lesson. We're looking at all the planes. The sidewinder looked like it trimmed out, I'd say, relatively far forward. The Griffin relatively far forward. Cardinal Sin about 3/4 of the way back. Tradition always seems to be right about in the middle. The Green Cardinal always. Now notice on the Green Cardinal, those lead outs are as far back as they can go. That means the CG must have been relatively far back. Okay, Tweener relatively far back. Red Baron as far forward as we could possibly get them. And Tsunami kind of far forward. So what that means is now I'll reference off Tsunami, take a mean average point. I don't want to have the slot go any further back than I have to, because the lead out guide is going to add weight. And I'll make up an average here so that I can go as far back as the Cardinal and as far forward as Tsunami. And from that, I'll interpolate that right onto that wingtip. See, now I know relative to Tsunami, I want to be as far forward as I can get these before I make up the guide. And I want to be as far back, and I'll measure this off just to make sure I'm not making this wrong, as far back as this. And what I can do now, I know my dimensions, take the tape off. And that should give us the full range of adjustment from the position furthest back of all the PMs that we've built. The furthest back one was here and the furthest forward one was here, so we have the whole range here to use. This is a good spot for a brand new X-Acto blade here. Now see, if you're going to use a lot of motor offset, you're going to want to have roughly the lead outs go as far forward as they can go. If you're going to use 0 motor offset, the lead outs will probably go relatively far back. But what we've done is cover all those possibilities. So even if we want to move, we want to have a very rearward CG, we'll have that option, a very forward CG, or somewhere in the middle. Yep. Now this is a good spot for the machinist ruler. You just fold up some sandpaper, get a nice edge here. Get it nice 90 degrees. Take a little dowel or paintbrush end and radius off the ends with some sandpaper wrapped around it. Now I hardened up that edge with CA just temporarily so I can work on this. Now what I want to do next, I want to take and measure out exactly this dimension and go make up my lead out guide. Now what I want to do with a machinist ruler, I want to measure the spread that I have. The spread is 4 1/4, so I'll actually make my adjustable lead outs 4 1/2. Now, a couple of words about material. This material here, 1/8 inch plywood with the grain going this way. I don't want the grain going any way. I don't want it going that way, this way. The grain going the long way, very important. I'm going to lay this, in fact I'll lay it out in the corner of the wood here. Just lay it out with a machinist ruler. If in doubt, make it a little thicker than you think it has to be, because here's what's happened. I've tried making these out of light ply. They self-destruct. The wood squashes from the washer. I've tried making it out of 16th plywood and laminating balsa and doing all kind of dumb things to try to make it lighter. Now, I want to make a center line down here, a center line here. I'll lay this out with a piece of 1/8 inch tape. You're going to need a piece of 1/8 inch tape to lay this out. Now if you get the center line going right down the middle of the tape, that'll give you a big enough slot for a 440 bolt. Here's another thing I've learned the hard way, needless to say, like everything, the hard way. I tried using 348 bolts to save a little weight, and what happens is after a season or two of adjusting them, and because you tighten them up, the heads round off, and then you can't get in there and get a nice clean wrench on them, and they're slipping and jumping around. 440s. Alright, and I want to have 4 1/2 inches. So let me leave a little meat and potatoes up here. Okay, now I'll go over, and what I'll do is I'll drill 2 holes with an 1/8 inch drill. Drill those 2 holes out, and then cut the slot on the Dremel saw. Alright, I drilled the 2 out with 1/8 inch drill. Now, the choices you have, if you can get a saw blade through there, I can't. So I'll cut this out by hand with just using a number 11 blade and a nice straight edge. You know what this reminds me of? It's funny. The first scratch-built kit I ever made, I needed to make up like F1 and F2 out of 1/8 inch plywood. And all I had was, believe me, when I was a kid, believe me, the dullest. You couldn't even cut butter with the knife, because my mother was kind of cheap giving me money for blades when I was 7 years old. So what happened is I tried to use a table saw, big table saw that was out in the garage like a contractor would use, and I must have made 400 pieces before I got 2 that fit. Unbelievable. Anyway, this is the trick here. Just keep going back and forth 100 times. Eventually you'll get it. You get enough of a groove, you don't even need the ruler after a while. But eventually you will get it, believe it or not. And of course, if you can afford new blades, hey, that's great. You don't have kids going to college and stuff, it's easy. Anyway, just want to, again, show the reality of building a plane, not the fantasy. The fantasy we can all fantasize about. This is the reality, busting your ass about it. Come on, baby. Come on, mule. Okay. Who said he can't get that piece made? Again, take the old machinist ruler, some 220, and just get a nice fit on that. And what I did, I just laid out randomly my two little blocks here that I want to cut these out and then put an eyelet and a screw in each side. Alright, I want to get two little eyelets and two little blind nuts in here. Okay, these are little eyelets, little SIG eyelets, of course. We'll just press that right in and hit it with some CA as step one. Now here's an important point. When you install these, you have the choice of installing them this way, in which case you will get the maximum ability to move the lead outs closer together, or you can install them this way, in which case you'll get the most forward and most rearward movement, but the lead outs will never come closer together than this. Or you have the third choice of putting it this way. This allows you to get as far forward as you can get, and as far, since you really never use all of the back adjustment, this is the way I prefer to do it. So this lead out, this wire is as far forward as we can get them, and this one I have that extra 1/4 of an inch into the guide. So what that'll allow me to do is just get an extra little bit of travel forward, but not back. I'm trading away front travel for back travel. This is my first choice here. Now, believe it or not, the washers on this are an important part. And what these washers are, these are called fender washers. They're number 6 fender washers. Now, the purpose of this is because these fender washers get a real good bite onto the plywood. You can see where they're as big as the plywood. And if you use the ordinary washers that come with 440 bolts, they're going to do this, pop this right apart and split it. These are number 6 fender washers. So now we just have a question of assembling this up. Now, one final little trick here. You see these fender washers on both sides. They're smooth. Take the back side and we'll take the old parting tool or engraving tool and roughen up the back side so it gets a better bite into the wood. You won't have to tighten the screws as hard that way. You can see after the engraving tool, it's got a nice little grip to it. It'll grab the plywood without over tightening the screw. Definitely a good idea to do. Also, another good idea before you assemble this, get a little WD-40 on a bolt, and what that does, just in case you happen to get some CA or whatever down into these bolts during the rest of the construction phase, you don't wind up having to rebuild the plane. Now, a couple little final thoughts here. I radiused this all off. Of course, made an arrow to mark which side's going frontwards in the plane when we actually get to install it. Another thing, too, there's some commercially available lead-out guides made out of plywood. Needless to say, you can buy them already made up. But these blocks on some of them are made out of Delrin. Now, let me tell you something about Delrin. In cold weather, if you fly in cold weather and adjust these and over-tighten them, you'll split the block. In which case, have fun, because you're going to cut that whole wingtip apart trying to get this fixed. So even if you buy one with the Delrin sliders, it'd be a good idea to make these up out of plywood anyway. I trimmed the bolts off even with a parting wheel. This is ready to put in the wing. Now what I'm going to do when I actually get this in the wing, I'll probably radius a little bit of this off so it fits right up in the front of the wing as tight as possible. Okay, now I'm going to go in, take the sanding drum and try to get this radius on the plywood so it's a nice tight fit up in the front of the wingtip. Back here it's just going to join to the balsa, and then what I'll do is I'll put an Allen wrench through here. I don't have an Allen wrench. Put an Allen wrench right through here to make sure I don't have the screws cocked up or cocked down so I can't get in nice and neat and get at the screws. You get all those alignments done before this actually gets glued in permanently. Now I just tacked that in. And I want to make sure I can get at both of the screws. And that the screw holes are right in the middle of the slot. It's just tacked in the corners. Now I can just put a real good glob of thick CA in there. And make sure that my bolts are right in the middle here. Okay, we got a nice healthy glob of thick CA in there. Same up here. It's nice and solid now. Next thing I want to do is I want to line both of these edges with 2 strips of 64th plywood. The reason being, as you go to tighten these up, ding dong, you're banging it all up. Also the lead outs where when these lead outs bend down or up, you don't want to put gouges and nicks and everything in here if you can help it. So I'll get 2 pieces of 64th plywood and just strip them off and lay them right in there. Now see, you can use an Allen wrench to hold this piece right in position while you trim it off. I haven't glued it in yet, but you don't want to go down below the bolt heads. This way the bolt heads can slide inside the plywood. So I'll just take a pencil line, put a pencil line on here, and just tack glue it in place. Now see, I have all these folded up pieces of sandpaper holding that right in position. While I'm holding it in position, I can just get some thin CA. When it's all done, get some scissors and trim it off. And just leave a little bit off and you can block sand that last little bit right in place. Now of course what it is, this is a perfect piece now to do on the bottom. So we'll get this piece fixtured in here on the bottom the same way. Take some folded up sandpaper, this way the CA doesn't stick to it. Let it rest on the bolt heads. Little quality touches, they all add up. Now once all these pieces are glued in place, we can block sand this in. Before we run the lead outs through it, it's a lot easier to sand this edge and get it all nice and even. Use a block and screw that right up with the tip. Boy, that'll really protect the edge. You can dress off these edges too. And years later, 5 years later, you'll still have a nice edge there. I just dressed this all off. We're almost ready to install this on the wing. The last thing I do is I try to make sure I have the full range of motion in the slider, that I haven't dropped any CA down in there, anything that's going to kill that motion. And when I'm happy with it, just find some mean average position. Now as I'm finishing the plane and doping the plane, I'll constantly move the lead out so I don't get 2 spots on here that don't have any dope. And of course I'll do the thing with the back one too. Any place that there's an interference, it's a lot easier to get in here and get the wood out now than it would be after you finish the plane. Now with the wingtip completed, actually the last time we're going to get in here, make sure this is all straight. Once I get the wingtip put on, I can cut this little brace out. That brace is only there to keep the wing from sandwiching in, oil canning, whatever you want to call it. Now what I want to do, I want to tack glue this in position, but most of all I want to make sure, a lot of times, and this is a good trick, a lot of times when you do this, what will happen is the block will cave in just a little bit. So now the block will be just a little thinner than the wingtip, and that's what happened here. So now I want to take a measurement right at the high point. See the block, if I hold this even, the block is lower. So I want to take a little piece of scrap balsa and put it in here to spread this. Now you can see from here how much this has to be spread. And of course I have that little bar in there that holds the airfoil from squeezing together, because we cut the spar out in between there. So we'll make up a little piece of scrap just like this in here, just to spread this out. Let me get it off the readout. Just to do this, spread it out just a little bit. Now, I'm not even going to glue that in, but if it was slipping around, you could tack glue it in. It's a nice press fit. Now, if it happens to be too big, we'll just take it out, block sand it off, till we get the same high point on the wing as this, and then we'll get our glue seam on there. Now see, on the first try, it's just a little bit too big, so we'll take that little piece out and just block sand, let's see, about 1/16 of an inch off. And that should be a really good fit. Now on the 5th try, we have it just about right, so we're ready to glue that in. Now the best way to do this, and I've already done this, is just get a couple little dots, tacks of glue, and each time you glue the top, flip it over and make sure you have the same on the bottom, that you're not gluing it on crooked. Run your hand along it. Remember, we are just a little bit bigger because of the tape. Get a couple of tacks. Like some good alignment here, because we don't want to change the shape of the wing here. A lot of times, especially with foam wings, one of the pitfalls you can fall into is when you cut the spar out here so the lead outs go through, the wing at the end gets to be like an oil can. We want this nice and solid if possible. Now when you're happy with all the fits, of course then now you can just run the whole bead. Try to get it to kick with a paper towel if you can. It's a big help, because now you won't have that popcorn growing in the joints. Go right down the cap strip. Get a nice solid seam of glue on here, and then we'll block sand out the joint. We like to get this edge block sanded out. Now any little gaps, I see I have a little gap out by the trailing edge here. Just kick that. We can fill that with just a little piece of scrap balsa. Ah, that feels so nice. Feels good. We'd like to get that glue seam so when we take this out in the sun, the summer of '95, which is 6 months away, whatever, you don't want to see that glue seam. You can see this little area where we don't have the trailing edge just perfect, and it's not a big deal. Just for right now, fill it in with a chunk of balsa. Let it sit out oversized, and we'll sand that right off. Now remember, we don't want to make this wingtip is pretty thin relative to the fact it's 0 in some spots. We don't want to make it any thinner than it has to be, so we want to get a block for doing this joint, a nice new block, a nice new piece of 320 paper, and really work on this edge. We haven't taken the spreader out yet. Really work on this joint to the point where we're real happy with it. Any little gaps, holes, we can just fill in with chunks of balsa like this. getting close to the end of this session. So we're going to come back here later tonight and try to do the other wingtip if we can. I've been looking at the clock over my shoulder. It's almost time to go to work. And what I've been trying to do is get a morning session and a night session and keep the wife happy. It's almost impossible. Help George out a little bit with his project. And of course, finish up some things around the shop here and my little renovation of my own. So that in mind, I'll do the rest of this off camera. Carefully get this joint right in to where you can't feel it, but try not to get too much of a blend downward. Just trying to make sure I have everything true out at this wingtip with a long block. I'm going to pull those little sparse supports that we have in there out. Make sure both sides are equal. Now I can get right in there, probably with my finger, and just break it out. The one will come right out. Famous last words, it'll come right out. I'll just cut it out with the knife. Okay. The other one we can just trim out. And that'll allow our lead outs to go the full range of motion. What's amazing now is how strong and rigid this wing is right now relative to the wing that doesn't have the tip on. Now the other thing I like to do right at this point in time, after I have that pretty well sanded out, I like to get the lead outs all bent. These things are obviously poking you in the eye every minute at a time you're working on it. So next step is I'm going to get out the soldering iron and try to get these bent and soldered up. Now because we have no support now all the way out, I took a piece with the grain going straight up and down so that I can't, when I squeeze on this wingtip, I don't want to see any of this flexing stuff. All right, first thing of making up the lead, I want to cut two pieces of tubing about 3/8 of an inch, ½ inch long, and I'll just roll a knife on this and cut it. This is one size smaller than tank vent tubing. I assume it's 3/32. Cut two pieces of wire and get two eyelets. Get ready to bend the wire up. Whoop, there's one. Now you always want to remember to put this little piece of tubing on first. Once that's on, then you can go ahead and make your little bend. And again, a pair of needle nose pliers, and this is just one of those little fussy things you just have to play with. Keep moving the pliers out. Then I just pretty much bend this gentle radiuses and don't bend it back and forth or the damn thing will break. What I like to do too is get my eyelet pressed in there. And of course sometimes it just takes a little fiddling. But what I like is the fact that even if you have a fracture in a wire out at the lead out end, you don't lose the plane. That's the reason for doing this. I've seen where they make little diamond shaped things and they have fractured and broken. A little piece of tubing, push it up there, and that's ready to silver solder. Now needless to say, like all joints in the airplane, this is stay bright solder, stay bright flux. Be sure, of course, this joint and all joints, when you use Stay Bright, when you're all done, deflux it with baking soda and water. Now what I like about this is it gets a real nice layer of solder right out here in the eyelet. And even if you had the wire fail out there, and I have seen planes where the wire failed, especially with braided wire. Needless to say, I never recommend braided lead-out wire, always solid wire. And now that Scotty has wire 48 inches long, the next ship we make, we won't even have to put that joint in the wire. That'll be real nice. Thanks to Scotty. Baking soda and water on all joints, and then of course we'll clean this with alcohol. And you can polish this up with a little piece of 400 sandpaper if you want. Another good idea is when you're done with any kind of soldering joint like this, wash your damn hands. A lot of times you get something in your eye and you forget you have this sulfuric acid flux on your hands, and yuck, messy anyway. This is just plain isopropyl alcohol. This gets off all the baking soda. Just deburr this, get off all the rough edges. Okay, we got these guys all cleaned up, defluxed, cleaned, alcoholed, whatever. Alcoholics Anonymous. Check the controls are still free. We're pretty much finished with this session. We're going to try to come back here tonight and work for an hour or two, but no guarantee. Again, life is unpredictable. I'm back from work, all showered up, and I realized we're right at the end of this tape, so there isn't much point starting the other wingtip. I only have about 2 or 3 minutes more of tape. So what I'm going to do is basically take this time to wish everybody, and we're entering the Christmas season, and for anybody that doesn't really know, my wife Karen and I and our family, we kind of, well, make an embarrassment out of Christmas is what it is. We really love Christmas. We set up under the Christmas tree our tree and our Lionel trains in our village, and kind of embarrassing if you're not into it. Anyway, we are into it, and we really want to take this time to wish everybody, of even the guys that like tune pipes, hey, even you, no problem. We want everybody to have a Merry Christmas, a really great 1995, and we're looking forward to, as a family, the team trials, Pasco, as much as you can look forward to it. And we really look forward to flying this new guy. And this is part of the thing, if you miss this point, in the middle of the winter or the middle of the cold weather or whatever, if you miss the whole point here, you build, it's a social thing too. We've been enjoying our Monday night classes. We've been enjoying having people over the house. We're probably going to have Jim Damarello over soon. He's ready to assemble his PM. But the social end of this hobby for me is absolutely critical, absolutely important. And I really do enjoy sharing the things that I've learned through these videos and through phone calls and whatever. And I hope everybody that's watching this, even in years to come, hey, even in years when I'm gone, when I am gone, man, you know, like Yul Brynner, smoking killed me. This is what killed me. And while I was alive, I had more fun. I could never wish a better life for myself. I really had great things. Anyway, enough emotion. Debbie Borelli's probably crying with emotion right now. Peggy Ortiz is saying, throw the bum out. Anyway, Merry Christmas to everybody. We got a few minutes left, and I'll just finish out this video with some footage of something, who knows what. Just so we don't end at an uneven part in the video, we're going to pick it up with the next video. Next video, we got these two great blocks. You can make earmuffs out of them. You could make a pipe for Gieske out of it. Who knows what you could make. You could make a nose for Mike Rogers out of it. I don't know. You could make a duckbill. Why am I doing this? Merry Christmas to everybody. See you on the next video.
On and takes the lead. The plane that was able to stay the closest to the Strega was Rupp in the Samurai. Tiger continued to hold on to that lead, but then Mickey Rupp, who drove the G.C. Murphy Special in Indianapolis in '65, look at him power around to Stephanie and take the lead, indicating that he may have something for the other pilots to talk about this weekend. Less than a half a lap after passing Tiger, Mickey Rupp opened up a 2-second advantage. And to Stephanie in an unusual position here, actually chasing a plane for the lead. We had a camera and microphone with Mickey.
Guys, Tiger is in our mirror. Run, horse, run.
Well, Tiger was in his mirror then, but you knew that if all possible, Stephanie would show everyone the strength that's made him the most respected pilot in unlimited racing today. Then with a lap and a half to go, things started to go wrong for Rupp. Stephanie began to close in, and there he takes the lead from the Samurai. That was the first indication that perhaps Rupp was pushing too hard. And indeed, that was the case. Rupp encountered big problems.
Cow guys, I think we got a little problem here. They're oil pressure. Whoops. Air boss. Race 5, gonna need a mayday. I think we just lost an engine. Race 5 is in a mayday. Racers, the mayday aircraft is on base. He's got plenty of altitude. Mayday aircraft on base. Just bring it on in, Mickey. You're looking good.
Look at the oil and the water all over the windshield. That pretty much tells it all. But as you can see beneath him, he did have the runway. Meanwhile, a great battle shaping up for second between Delbert Williams and Howard Pardue. And they come up on the Huntress. Riding now with Robert Converse in the Huntress 3. You can see the other two competitors passing him by. Here's to Stephanie. He won that fourth heat race. And Williams held off Pardue's challenge for second. The good news was that Rupp was able to land safely after his May Day, but his weekend was over. The official order of finish to Stephanie, Williams, Pardue, Converse, and finally Mickey Rupp. And Marty caught up with Mickey just after he stepped from his disabled plane.
Mickey, a scary moment for everybody.
Well, listen.
What happened up there?
I think we blew a head gasket or something. We got more water than anything else coming out, so we were making the power, and we thought we had the race under control, and I felt it start to just shimmy a little bit, so I pulled back, and about that time, Tiger shot by, and next thing I know, man, we got smoke flying.
I had you at some 58-second laps, which is much better than your qualifying effort.
Well, probably. We've been holding back to see if the unfortunate thing goes with racing.
To Stephanie, well, he also had problems. Look at the oil there on the left side of the craft. Although he won the fourth heat, he knew things weren't right. Marty talked with him.
Tiger, it looks like this was a very expensive victory.
I think you might be right. We don't know, of course, yet. We had a problem out there, and as you can see, it's smoking pretty good right now. So I don't know. We'll have to, get into it and see exactly what's wrong.
Did you know when it created the problem? Because you were running 101, 6-7 seconds slower than your qualifying time, and then all of a sudden you stepped it up to catch Mickey.
Yeah, I did that, and we were catching Mickey, as you probably saw. We were almost there, and then we had a problem with one of the pumps, and I didn't pick it up. Induction temp got awful high. Went to emergency system. That worked, but unfortunately, it may have already done some damage. So we'll just have to really, get into it, see what the problem is. Hopefully, we can get it fixed tonight.
Well, the crew went straight to work, trying to find the source of the problem. They eventually learned it wasn't a burned piston, but a failed ADI that scuffed a cylinder wall. Into the night they worked. For the second straight night, as a matter of fact, the previous night, they helped the Perestroika crew work on their plane.
This kind of operation has to be done perfectly, because when it comes to tomorrow, we've only got one shot at this. And as you know, tomorrow's the run for the roses, so this has to be perfect tonight.
At sunrise on Sunday morning, race morning, the work was completed and the engine was fired. Now, the rules allow a team with problems like this one to be able to test their plane on race morning. Stephanie checked it over with the crew. They decided that they would take the plane up for a test run. There was still remnants of the oil on the outside of the plane, but their major concern was inside the engine cowl. DeStefani took the Strega into the air. The plane seemed to be running well. The crew kept close tabs on the telemetry, which would tell them if there was a potential problem. Things look good for DeStefani. Could he pull off the clean sweep, fast qualifier, heat race winner, and winner of the first ever ARL sanctioned event? On to third.